A pleasure to meet all at last. Or maybe not so much. Because in this instance of HJN Super Graphics, I unfortunately do have something that I need to share with you, because almost a whole year ago was when I decided to get a hold of two crappy games and play them. Yeah, I ended up wasting about 2 weekends of my life with these two titles. One of which in particular was worse than the other. But the thing is, this wasn't just any property that came. It was King Kong. Yeah. I talked a lot about Game Mill Entertainment in the past, even to this day. While there are some ups and downs that they have managed to create with their overall library, it seems that with some good contenders like the Nickelodeon Kart Racers trilogy, as well as a few other notable picks, while Game Mill Entertainment has actually done their best in overall keeping up with the many different franchises and allowing for such franchises to be kept alive and some to even be revived, it seems that not every contender out there was well worth it here. Outright Games, Microids, and even other companies are partially to blame for the likes of bringing along movie, TV show, or novel-based games. And while we have a lot of this stuff recently, back then, let's just say, it was not so great to have a movie-based game. LJN, Mindscape, Ubisoft. There was just tons of different pieces of crap that got released over the years. And while today, it still is a common theme for some games based off of movies, TV shows, and other such popular bits of pop culture to not do so well here, this contender in particular, Skull Island: Rise of Kong, a redemption and vengeance story about the son of the legendary King of the Apes himself, King Kong, embarking on a quest to not only get big and strong, but to avenge his fallen father. And the thing is that with such a concept like this, basically being more original than that of what it was technically based off of, it's extremely loosely based off of the likes of Skull Island itself, which was a 2017 movie as an addition to the Legendary Monsterverse, or LMV for short. And the Legendary Monsterverse has by far been one of the best modern representations of King Kong himself, considering the fact that he started off rather strong, first appearing in World War II at the opening prologue scene of Skull Island, and then reappearing during the Vietnam War in 1973. But then 47 years later, as we know in 2020, we got ourselves the epic resurgence of the legendary monster mash, King Kong vs. Godzilla, or as the new film is known as, Godzilla vs. Kong. It was followed up by a 2024 sequel known as Godzilla and Kong: The New Empire, in which the two titans team up for a temporary alliance in order to take down some greater threats that are high above them, or, in this case, well below them, in a certain world that exists way beyond the normal realm. However, in the terms of Kong himself, the game Rise of Kong unfortunately does not seem to do that good of a job. In fact, it probably does worse of a job than a good majority of the other games that I have talked about from Microids, Game Mill, OG, etc. And it's even arguable that in the same regard as how Mindpulp regarded this game as the worst of 2023, they probably are right. But just think about it. I played the game months after it came out, and it was a bit hesitant for me at the time, knowing that I was rather busy with other things. But after I finally got around to it, well, let's just say, making Rise of Kong an inclusion to GWK Mainline Season 13 is one thing, but oh my gosh, it is so bad. I mean, the story first starts off with an opening cutscene where an elder, King Kong, unfortunately gets attacked. A red tyrant. attacks him and defeats him, leaving his child an orphan. The little Kong basically escapes with his life, and while he does struggle to survive at first, he eventually does make haste, fighting against any enemies that dare cross his path. And over the years, he would grow up bigger and stronger, and would occasionally work up the courage to fight even bigger, more terrifying foes, including a giant sandworm and even a giant crab. So, not so basic things in regards to the enemies, but when you think about a game that's essentially the adaptation of King Kong on his homeland known as Skull Island, and the many, many other inhabitants of Skull Island that happen to get in his way, or possibly make his day bad, who would have thought it would have been a crappy experience? I mean, the first thing you might realize are the graphics. The animation isn't been off by any means. The control movement is not necessarily as fluent as one would have expected, and probably the worst thing about it is that there's a good amount of glitchiness, fading, fuzziness, and other such changes that occur with the scenery and the overall layout. The thing is, this sort of pre-rendered look here, which happens to give it more of a CG feel to it, akin to what we saw with King Kong over the last 20 years or so, supposedly has not been done so well. And the developers supposedly didn't have that great of a budget. Yeah, when you think about it, it's one thing to rush a game. It's one thing to have a game not with a big budget. And it's also yet another thing to have a game that doesn't have as much of a budget and was rushed and was made specifically to be about King Kong, the eighth wonder of the world, for crying out loud. And to screw something like that up would take a lot of balls. But the thing is though, is that this game is primarily made as an action-adventure exploration game with beat-em-up elements. Because after all, the main thing in this game is that you're stuck in these areas until you clear out all the enemies. And let's just say that the enemies supposedly seem easy enough to take down, as King Kong can attack in a variety of different ways. I mean, you could have him jump and slam, you could have him punch, you could have him kick, you can have him grip onto them, you can have him toss them to the other side of the map, you could have him perform other things as well. Even execution moves are made as finishers for when the enemies are stunned or dizzy. So these variety of attacks is actually a pretty unique way, so it doesn't feel as monotonous. But the thing is that there's not much indication on if the enemies are taking damage or whatnot. And what's worse is that you don't really get much of an indication of how much health they have left before they die. And the thing is, probably one of the worst things is that even on a lower difficulty, if this even operated on a difficulty setting at all, it still is rather challenging, because sometimes groups of enemies will form and you can hardly get them to go away. Like, you can't really attack them once at a time. There's a good chance that they might bundle up together and gang up on you. And the thing is, you're only able to hit one of them at a time, which does make it pretty difficult. On top of all that, while there are healing items, mainly flowers, as your method of recovering your health, they unfortunately are a bit scarce, and they don't exactly respawn, unlike certain things. I mean, the enemies respawn a lot, well, why not the flowers? But here's the thing though. There's a total of 5 bosses. I actually made it as far to get into the 3rd level, with 4 different levels, plus the final boss, whom is considered as the Red Tyrant, a giant dinosaur, whom basically was responsible for the death of Kong's father. It seems like it would be a not so difficult path to follow here, but let me tell you something. I actually stopped by the end of the 3rd level. And once I got to the 4th level, oh my gosh, I died so many times that I just quite literally tossed my controller to the other side of the room and it busted through a window. No joke. Absolutely no joke. I literally busted a window over this game. And if that's not a good enough testimony, then I don't know what is. But it goes to show that with something like this, King Kong having his own video game after a while without one, and this is what we get. If you ask me, we need a more proper game. Like if we had something that was made by Square Enix or even EA, I wouldn't even care at this point if it comes from something like them, but anything but Game Mill or any of that stuff, they might as well be considered, let's say, the LJN of modern day gaming. Not that it wouldn't really matter by any means. Even LJN had their ups and downs over the years. But while they were indeed notorious for putting out crappy games all over the place, movie-based games were no exception to any of this. But with Game Mill giving us the similar thing, it's no coincidence, the way I see it. So, I obviously never finished the game, and I probably have no intention to do so. I didn't even bother getting the PS5 version, because what kind of chance of any graphic capabilities or whatnot, what would it matter? Why would it matter even? In any case though, Skull Island Rise of Kong, a game that is supposed to give us the unique tale of King Kong with his everyday office work, bashing his enemies to death on Skull Island and asserting his own dominance as King of the Apes. And it's more like he is made into a complete joke. So with that in mind, GWK Season 13 will be having this game. But oh man, you will not be happy at how I've experienced it. By the end of that whole thing, you'll see why I threw my controller through a window. And possibly destroyed it too on impact. And as for scoring, well, 3.1 out of 10.1. So, almost in line with the others that have talked about it so far. And Mind Pulp, thanks for warning me about the game itself. I'll leave a link to their video about it in the description box below. And that way, you guys will have no excuse to find out why this game was so bad by any means. And with that in mind, thank you for watching this piece of HJN Super Graphics, and I'll be back tomorrow to once again showcase more material.